When I'm standing here and the Mighty Car Mods garage is empty, you know it's a big day. Today's a monumental day because there's a car coming into the garage that Marty has purchased that he's been talking about for a decade or more. You have been asking about it for a decade or more, and now finally we get to see Marty's new car. Everybody, here it is, RX7!
A rotary!
Welcome to another episode of Mighty Car Mods. We finally done it. RX7, and by we, I mean he.
That's right. Always wanted to get into a rotary, just had to find the right one. When I was a teenager and I was buying Geminis for $100 off forums, RX7s were just that sort of next level and out of reach and had the cool factor and the coupe factor, and they were in pretty good condition then because they were, I don't know, 15, 20 years old at most. And it's been really hard to find one since then, and I've always had my eye out, and then this popped up off the internet, sight unseen, in a completely different state of Australia.
Marty bought it full suity.
I did.
Didn't you?
What's that mean? What's full suity?
Suity.
What's that?
Sight unseen off the internet.
All right. Full suity. And the guy who owned it had bought it and sort of done a bit of a resto on it. So it's reasonably high Ks. It's got 200 and something thousand Ks on it. But it's been well loved.
I didn't think rotaries lasted that long.
Well, the thing is, if they're looked after, they do, and if they're serviced, and no doubt it's had, you know, engine or a recondition in its life for sure. But it's also been painted. They did a reasonably good job of painting it, and some other like nice restoration things. The wheels have been redone. The interior's been worked on.
And I love the wheels.
Yeah, it's period correct and all that sort of stuff. It's about, I would say it's about 80% there, and that's kind of what I wanted to go for because I didn't want to strip an old car and have to fully restore it from scratch. That's Gemini territory, and as we've discovered, that takes ages and it's really hard to get stuff for. So I wanted something that was reasonably complete, and got it just before the prices sort of exploded, so I paid a reasonable amount for it in the low 20s, which is kind of okay. When I was looking for these originally when I was a kid, they were like 5, 6, 7, 8 grand. Makes sense they've sort of started to come up. But this is a Series 2, so 1982 model.
There may be some people watching right now, believe it or not, that have never seen a car like this because maybe in 1982 they weren't born, or maybe when they were born in the 2000s, they were like, these are too old to care about. So before we dive any further, let us give you a quick little bit of history about this car, and then we're going to jump in and go for a drive.
So everyone's heard of rotaries, but what makes these cars with such tiny engines so special? Well, there's no pistons, there's no rods, and instead there's rotors, housings, and eccentric output shafts. The fact that Mazda took this engine designed by Felix Wenkel in Germany in the 50s and managed to successfully sell it for 50 years is impressive, considering just about every other automaker in the world was just using pistons. Rotaries have less moving parts, they're smooth, have a high power to weight ratio, and these days can be built and tuned to make power figures well into the 4 digits. But it's not all good news. They're also thirsty for fuel, often use more oil than a piston engine, and emissions aren't great either. They're also often called unreliable, but that usually says more about how it's maintained than the design itself. This particular Mazda has a 5-speed gearbox and a 12A naturally aspirated carby-fed engine, which means it's twin rotor with a 1.2 litre displacement and rated to 85 kilowatts. Which in a light two-door coupe that handles well was a winning combination 40 years ago and is still awesome to drive today.
This Series 1 RX-7 came out in 1978, which from what I understand was a brilliant year. But then this particular one's 1981 to 1983, because this is a part 2 of a Series 1, is that right?
This is a Series 2 of the first generation, which is, I think, the way that people normally etymologise cars. Okay. This is a SA22. Yep. But it's also, in some places, was an FB because it was a second gen. Anyway, those kind of details are boring. All we need to know is this weighs just under a tonne, and they did really well in racing back in the day. And
the weighing under a tonne meant they stayed underneath a certain Japanese government regulation for dimensions and for engine size, similar to what they did with K cars later on, which meant that you would get some kind of exemptions in costs and things like that. In America, they were really popular. I think in the early 90s, they called it like Import Car of the Year. Australia, not so popular. There's not many of them around, are there?
Yeah, well,
like this is a rare car.
It's also you got to remember it's a sports car, so people aren't buying this to put 3 kids in the back and drive around Australia. They're buying it because it looks cool, or it's an icon or whatever. And it's also worth remembering that.
It does look cool.
It's also worth remembering that a lot of the time the technology that happened. So a lot of manufacturers were playing around with rotaries in the 70s. Like even GM and NSU and
they were having a crack, weren't they?
Manufacturers were having a crack. Now, why were they having a crack? Because there was a massive fuel crisis. The idea was to try and obviously get lots of performance, not using too much fuel. But there was a bunch of things about the way that the rotary engines burnt fuel that sort of made them pollute more in some ways, but less in others, but they were reasonably efficient. But this thing made 85 kilowatts, which is about 100 horsepower, in the early 80s, which is actually a decent amount of power, but it wasn't just the power that people were so excited about, particularly people who were racing them, because of course they did. These were really good handling things. People who raced loved them. They could chuck them around. They could drive them at 10/10 all the time and have a great time. So the rotary was it was just an engine that you could just get in the thing, and Mazda would manage to keep it going for quite a long time, right up to
all the way
FDs.
up to the RX8, after that, to the
true.
RX8. And now the RX8 is not a successor to this car, okay?
It's a different
say
thing.
RX, but it's not. It's got back seats, and I'm going to choose my words carefully, Martin. I don't think it has the classic iconography, blah, 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 of this. It doesn't have the mystique of the RX7.
Yeah, so, that said, in 10, 15 years, who knows what will happen? Maybe RX8s will be the hot sauce and this will be the stationary engine at the car meet that no one's looking at. What it will not be right now, though, is stationary, because we're going to get in it and take it for a drive. It's basically in bog stock. I think it's got like a little exhaust on it with a dump pipe, probably because the original one rusted out. So it's a bit noisier, but it's got a lot of the original stuff on the engine, original air cleaners. And as far as I know, I've not owned another one to be able to compare it, but I know that in terms of what they look like and what they sound like and run like, this is pretty original. Still got to use a choke, do a bunch of carby-related stuff to make it work. So I say let's drive it. Let's try and drive it. Because, yeah, it's a near 40-year-old carby running old thing. Yeah, that no power, no central locking. I think it might have an LSD, though, which is pretty cool.
Oh, gee, it's nice inside, isn't it?
All right, we doing this?
Yeah.
All right, hang on. Choke it first. I mean, use the choke, don't... Anyway.
There we go. There we go.
The fan's louder than the engine.
It feels so good. It feels tight.
It does, doesn't it?
And it feels quiet.
Yeah. So
it doesn't feel like it's about to fall apart.
Not at all, because I think it's been restored and reasonably well. Like I said before, it's got over 200,000 Ks. It's got 290,000 Ks.
Wow.
But the speedo doesn't work. So who knows how long ago that stopped.
Yeah, okay.
But yeah, it's been reasonably lovingly restored. It's got like the dash has been recovered, the seats have been re-dyed. The headlining's the biggest issue internally.
Yeah, it's just normal for this age though.
A bit gross. But in terms of what's a rotary like to drive, because I've only had a little bit of experience driving them before. I've driven an FD, the twin turbo 13B, new, like more modern one. And at the time I was kind of underwhelmed. They didn't really have the mystery that they have attached to them now, and so it was a bit like, oh, this is kind of slower than everything I own.
Yeah, yeah.
And what's this one like in comparison? Well, it feels older because it's got a carby, and it you really do need to rev it. You've got to be a bit more like aggressive with the controls.
But I think for the time, these did like 0 to 100 in 9 seconds or something, which if you think of the early 80s, that is pretty fast, especially for a smaller car.
Definitely.
And obviously I think that would be faster than a 240 with a 2-litre in it.
Yeah.
But you got to, I mean, because that was underwhelmingly slow in Japan.
Yep.
But for this to go, you got to get up it, right?
You really do, because of the kind of carby that's in it and everything. You've got like secondary, or it's just a bit more agriculture in terms of if you want to go faster, you got to absolutely just nail it. You can't bring it on slowly or be gentle with it. There's none of that going on. It's just like, let's go. It also gets heaps of attention. It's kind of cool. People appreciate it, or then maybe they had one.
Give it a bit, mate. Give it a bit in second. Oh, dude, that is so good.
Yeah, it's cool.
Oh my god, that's unreal.
And that only revved to $5.5 grand because speed limits and things.
See, that to me, sorry everyone, that feels more exciting than an S2000.
Oh yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
Like it's got more ziggy.
But you know what it's also got? Stink.
It's got a bit of stink.
It's got stink, doesn't it? Like it's got that sort of old car. Yeah, we can give you the performance, but you're going to pay for it in smells. And
there's always a cost though, man. Yeah. There's always a cost. I really, really like it. And there's such a similar feel and smell to the 240Z. I mean, 240Z's not held together with tech screws from Bunnings like this one is.
There's that.
But you know, it's I really like it, man.
Yeah.
I really like it.
Yeah, and like it's easy to forget just how old it is.
It sounds like it's about to die, though. Do you get that feeling every now and then?
On overrun, it's always got this kind of weird thing where it wants to die, and it has conked out. It's conked out on the highway multiple times. It's got like some warning light on that seems to be, related somehow to vacuum or revs. I don't know. Like it's as I say, I'm really happy with it in terms of the example of it. There's definitely room for improvement.
Yes,
of course, in terms of making this just a really nice car to jump in and drive.
Yeah,
it's pretty noisy, but I mean, a lot of art rotaries are. As soon as you put a bigger exhaust on them, they get really noisy. But yeah, man, it's
I love it, man, and a good buy, I reckon.
Yeah, it's definitely got the rotary vibes. It's got the revs. It's got that thing where people say rotary power is different to piston power. I completely agree.
Yeah.
Is it making more or less? Doesn't matter. It's just the way it goes on. It just keeps going linear, same power. I mean, I could rev it. You can rev it to the moon. That was $5,000 in it. Ready to change gears, but you don't need to if you don't want to.
It's so good, man. I really like it.
Yeah,
I think it's great. Well done, Martin. And a nice thing, again, you know, you've been talking about it for a long time and you actually did it.
Yeah.
You committed to it.
Yeah.
Because owning a rotary is a commitment, right? It's like a relationship. You got to work at it.
Yeah.
You got to, you got to take time to nourish it.
But luckily we're in, the year and the era that we're in is that all the technology now exists that Mazda didn't have in the early 70s when they were making these. And if you could give the technology now to them and say, hey dude, you can make it run cleaner, more efficient, more power, start every time, all this diagnostic stuff, they'd be like, give it to us.
Which is exactly what we're going to do.
Which is what we do.
I went back to look at some of the earliest photos of cars that I took when I was in high school, and it's wall-to-wall Geminis and early RX7s. Front engine, rear-wheel drive, 70s and 80s styling. I'd figured that I'd missed the boat with both these kind of cars as clean examples dried up along with the parts to fix them. While the Gemini is a long-term, ground-up resto, this ticked so many rotary boxes and wouldn't take months or years to fix. And this example has survived because previous owners have put in time, effort and money into keeping it on the road, which sounds easy, but often it isn't. This is far from a show-level museum piece. I just want it to work reliably, make good power so it can live on as long as there's dinosaur juice available to put in the tank. And it would be nice if it could do a whole drive without conking out.
Awesome car, man.
Well, it's awesome in theory, and I'm not saying that RX7s don't work, because obviously they've survived this long. They sold 500,000 of them, and there's still a lot left.
This doesn't work.
Well, this is not reliable. So, I mean, the issue is it's got a carby. That's the issue. I know that was the thing for a long time, because that's just what the world used. But these days there's so many better options out there.
Are we fixing it?
Yeah, which is what I'm interested in exploring, which we're going to do next time on Mighty Car Mods. Because I've ordered a bunch of stuff for this and we're going to install it. We're not going to unpurify it too much, just a sprinkle of unpurity.
Yes,
but
a sprinkle of smoky paprika.
I just want to make it so you get in the thing, you turn the key, you go, it works, it's reliable, it's efficient.
Great.
Yeah.
All for it. Well, see you next time on Mighty Rotary Mods, but not too many rods. Rods?
Well, it has no rods.
No rods.
No
not
rods.
Too many rods.
Mighty no rods.
So we'll see you next time. Of course, if you want to support the show, you can grab some merch from the shop, such as this t-shirt. It's an engine. That's not a rotary. That's got rods. That doesn't. There's Martin. He's got a shirt. You can get a thing. Thank you very much. We'll ride our scooters
while we
home.
scoot, can I do my rotary impression?
Oh, no. But now you've got to stop. And now I'll give you a piggyback. Because I'm towing. Yep, that's it. So this is me towing you home now, see?
Oh, my rods.